False narrative reasserting itself off a stop and frisk is going to impact quality of life enforcement. You seem to take a very strong position that you're not backing off of quality of life.
Oh, that's correct. The stop, question, and frisk issue is a totally different issue than quality of life. But the same forces that were able to undermine and give a false sense about the importance of stop, question, and frisk are now seeking to try to do the same thing with quality of life. And that's unfortunate, because quality of life enforcement like stop, question, and frisk are essential tools for the police to have. The challenge for us is to make sure we use them appropriately. But quality of life is a very different office. The enforcement of incivility is a totally different circumstance. It is based on probable cause. It is based on citizen calls for assistance, 911, 311. So it's a totally different situation, but the same groups that went after stop, question, and frisk appear to be going after quality of life on the same basis.
To follow up on that, it seems to me you seem to think that the reality is that there is a disparity racially and ethnically.
That's the reality. But the idea that we can engage in policing that's racially proportionate is absurd. Absolutely absurd. The idea, because 25% of the population happens to be black, that we only arrest 25% in that population group. Sorry, it doesn't work that way, because when you look at the victimization and what is lost on the part of the advocates going after quality of life enforcement is the victims. We focus on the victims, who are also disproportionately minority. So let's think about the victims first in this circumstance.
Well, obviously some people are angry in the communities about this unevenness they feel in enforcement. What do you do about that?
Well, it's the community that's calling us, isn't it? When you look at where the 911 calls are coming from, where the 311 calls are coming from, which drives quality of life enforcement, it's coming from those same communities that also disproportionately one race or another. So we go where the calls come from, we go where the help is needed, we go where the victims are. And that's the reality. And if those numbers are racially disparate or disproportionate, well, that's the reality. We can't. Am I going to apportion? I'm sorry, you've had your 25% of calls this month, we're not coming. Well, the argument that some of these groups are making would have it that way. In other words, you represent 25% of the population, so you only get 25% of the police services. And once you've reached your quota, we don't come anymore. It's absurd.
Commissioner, what did you think of the prosecutors or the district attorney's proposal that some of these crimes be handled at the precinct level and not go through the criminal system?
We're very supportive of that, the idea. He used the term precinct level, but the reality of what he's talking about is moving some of these offenses from criminal court into civil court. And we have been engaged in intimate discussions with him. We're engaged in a project with the Brooklyn DA right now, which is the idea of, in some of these first-time offenders in certain age categories for certain types of crimes, that we are looking for alternative ways to deal with those offenses. So we're looking at a broad range of alternative solutions to dealing with some of the minor crime problems that we encounter.
How confident are you that City Hall and other lawmakers can withstand the kind of pressure that you're saying is being put upon your implementation of broken windows and the policing of incivility?
I think there's a very strong support from the mayor. He understands it. And again, the argument is to clarify the argument, to take on those that are attacking quality of life enforcement with erroneous arguments, with putting out information that really does not correctly describe, as we did this morning. I think this panel did a very good job of talking about the need for it, the reality of it, and the emphasis that we place on its importance.
Commissioner, you made a comment this morning when it was brought up about Google and Apple, how they are changed their systems and then are not able to comply with search warrants. And I believe you made a comment. What is your take on that and that move by them?
My take is, and I discussed this with the Director of the FBI, Mr. Comey, the mayor and I were down there early this week. I believe he's making a major speech on it today. It's disgraceful that these two companies are basically consciously thwarting the effort of law enforcement to be able to access their devices to facilitate our investigation of crimes. And the harm that they are going to cause with their greed, basically, in terms of trying to increase sales, is disgraceful. And I'm hopeful that the legislature, if the Congress can ever get their act together, will effectively go at the hammer and tongs on this issue. It's very similar to the fight that we had to wage, the Attorney General, for example, Snyderman and others, to go after them to put kill switches on the phones, because they're making so much money on selling new phones because so many were being stolen. They had no incentivization to put a kill switch so that the phone would not be active after it was stolen. I noticed since we put those on that we're seeing significant declines in the theft of those phones. So once again, the greed of corporate America sometimes is phenomenal. In this case, Samsung is a phenomenal.
Can you talk to us about how prepared the NYPD is for Ebola?
We actually, I'm on my way down to a meeting that's getting underway at police headquarters to continue meetings that we've been having. The mayor's office last week had one with OEM, with all city agencies, and we're continuing our particular police focus on that to deal with the many aspects of that issue as it might impact the city if we were to have a case that was generated here. So we're in the process, as we speak, of sitting down at headquarters today to continue building out what we're learning as this thing goes forward.
Are cops getting contamination suits?
We already have a significant number of hazmat suits, et cetera, going back to following 911 and the various gear, et cetera. So part of what we'll be looking at certainly is an inventory of what we have, trying to get to the best of our ability instructions out to all of our personnel as the learning curve is continuing on this issue. That as we see watching the news each day, there's a new element to this every day, is the temperature of 101, an appropriate temperature. Obviously not when the nurse that contracted it had a temperature of 99.5. So even issues like that about the learning curve is changing. The instructions will have to stay very contemporary for our officers.
What is your take on the so-called Ebola memo sent out where 911 dispatchers are not supposed to use the term Ebola over there? They're supposed to say fever or travel.
In terms of, this is some of what we're talking about in the discussion going forward, that use of language that might may be inappropriate for an incident. So, for example, we've got the flu season coming up, and with elevated temperatures, vomiting, symptoms very similar to Ebola in many respects. So it's much the same as when you have a bomb threat, and then you have a large number of bomb calls will start coming in. Similarly here, that these are all efforts to try and ensure that we're not inflaming the issue or misinforming the public, or for that matter, misinforming our public safety personnel as to how to deal with it, how to recognize it, and how to respond to it if they see it. Okay.
Do one more.
So if you excuse me, I've got to get down to the Ebola meeting. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.